Namaskaram. Welcome to Atharva Forum. Gnanananda Mayam Devam Nirmalas Patikakrutim Adaram Sarva Vidyanam Hayagriva Upasmahe. With blessings of Sri Lord Hayagriva, today I will introduce one of the greatest Advaitic philosophers Bharatavarsha gifted to us, Sri Bellamkonda Ramaraya Kavindra. Less known to the modern world, but understanding his works are quite essential, not only for the Advaitic research students, but also for the scholars and the sadhakas who are interested in knowing like how to lead a dharmic life, and also for the dharmic thinkers looking for some of the answers and some of the roadblockers that they encounter in understanding dharma. Before we proceed, please do subscribe to Atharva YouTube channel, YouTube Atharva Forum channel. On to the topic. Who is Sri Bellamkonda Ramaraya Kavindra? Before anything, like he's a great Hayagriva upasaka. As you have observed, we started this talk with a prayer to Lord Hayagriva. Who is Lord Hayagriva? Avatar of Mahavishnu. And in order to attain like true knowledge or like the true education, Vidya, Gnanananda Mayam Devam, and wisdom, we are seeking the blessings of Hayagriva, avatar of Vishnu, and he is the Adharam for all the education. And Ramaraya Kavi lived only for a very short period of time, like only for 38 years, and from 1875 to 1914, less than close to 100 years. And he composed more than 140 plus works in Sanskrit, and only 40 or so of them are available today. And Kavindra says that not his own work, and with only with blessings of Sri Lord Hayagriva, and he was able to write all this. And himself says that Hayagriva blessed him with all the gnana. And before we look into like what works did he compose, Bellankonda Ramaraya Kavi is an Advaitic philosopher hailed from coastal Andhra, from Pamidipadu Agraharam of Narsaraopeta on the banks of river Krishna in Guntur district. Being an Advaitic philosopher, he wrote several bhashyas and commentaries of Adi Shankara's works, explaining Vedanta and also being like strong critic and also the protector of Vedanta from all the opponents. And some of his books are considered as a basis for Advaitic scholars. And some of the recent scholars, which I encountered in my readings, were also surprised when they discovered his works and in depth level of the details in explaining the concepts of Shankara. And all his works are based on Veda Pramanas, Puranas, and our smritis and shrutis. And not only he holds like a strong stance on Advaita, but he also explains and corrects the understanding of Puranas whenever necessary. We will see in some of the works today which we discuss on how he corrects us in understanding those, and mostly from the Advaitic standpoint of view. And before we look into his works, a little bit about his family background. Like Bellankonda Ramaraya Kavi was born in Niyogi Brahmin family, and their family was a followers of Visishta Advaita tradition. And it is surprising to see that who is coming from Visishta Advaita background family and ended up as an Advaitic philosopher. And also, Bellankonda Ramaraya Kavi was given the title Apara Shankara, which means like another incarnation of Shankara, and with no intention of highlighting the debate between like Vaita and Advaita traditions, but knowing that is very crucial in the life of Ramaraya Kavindra. And just to recollect, Visishta Advaita tradition is based out of like Ramanuja's theories and believes in Bhakti Marga. And in fact, it is the only Marga for moksha with a clear distinction between like Artha, and hence the name Visishta, acquiring the name like Visishta Advaita. On the other hand, Advaita philosophy, we have like Jnana, which is like the Jnana is the only Marga for moksha, and everything is like Maya or Ajnanam, humans, objects, or animals around us. And Brahman is the only reality. And Bhakti is the path to Jnana. Even though the pramana for both the works of philosophies is Vedanta, like debate arises when understanding Samskrita Mahavakyas, such as Tvamasi and Sachidanandam, etc. Ramaraya Kavi spent most of his time extensively arguing and debating Ramanuja's Sri Bhashyam, And it is also said that Kavi has studied both the works of Sri Bhashyam of Ramanuja and at the same time like Advaita Siddhanta, and he understood like the conclusions given by Advaita Siddhanta from Advaita philosophy are more reasonable, and then he took strong stance on Advaita and dedicated his life into explain the works of Shankara from his own perspective. And he learned Upanishads, Sri Rudram, Manorama, Patanjali Bhashyam, etc., and gave detailed commentaries on most of the works. Not only he read Siddhanta Kaumudi, but also gave like a simplified commentary on one of his famous books, which is like Saratratri, which is currently not available, but also it surprised his teachers when he wrote that. And he wrote at a very young age, and his teachers were surprised with the scholarly work of his. And other thing that kind of fascinates the readers is that the material available these days is very small. Like out of 140 works, only like 43 works are available, and most of his works were not even in English. They are entirely in Sanskrit. And when this posed this question to Ramaraya and why he doesn't spend money or anything on the book publications, he says that he never concentrated on publishing these works and Lord Hayagriva will take care of it. C.S.H.N. Murtigaru, who published his biography, referred to him as unexplored yogi. And over a course of time, like most of the articles were preserved, and most prolific authors and researchers mention that such great works are also not duly recognized. And this is the same case with most of the philosophers hailing from coastal Andhra or anywhere. How he turned into Hayagriva. So this is an interesting story in Ramaraya's life. Like one day he was sleeping, and in his dream, Lord Hayagriva appeared, and he guided him with a mantra, where so that he can do his independent learning. And Ramaraya Kavi went to his guru, Ratnamacharya, and he gave the book Yantra for his holy mantra, like seeing the Ramaraya's interest and blessings of Lord Vishnu. He handed over the book, and from that day, Ramaraya Kavi turned into Hayagriva Upasaka. And he dedicated all his works, and even in his every work, he acknowledges that Lord Hayagriva himself made him right. And not just being an Advaitic philosopher, he also composed several verses and several books on like Lord Vishnu. And some of his books are Sri Rama Vallabharaya Stuti Satakam, Rukmini Parinaya Chempu, Kandarpa Vilasam, etc. Now, before diving into his book Dharma Mañjari, which is the main topic of this talk, I will give you some brief introduction of some of the Udgranthas Acharya has written. One of the books he wrote is a legendary work. It's called Shankara Bhashyam, which in itself is like small encyclopedia of all the Advaitic work in defense against like Ramanuja's Sri Bhashyam. Some of the debates in this book occurs over like 140 chapters, and every proof of debating on which Sri Bhashyam is based is explained in detail from Advaitic point of view. And there are different vadas when such debate occurs between different philosophical traditions. And to recollect, some of the vadas are like Arambha Vada. Arambha Vada is the one which is based on like atomic theory, which we say today is from the great Rishi Kanada. And then other Vada is similarly is Parinama Vada, which is mostly taken by the philosophy, Advaita school of philosophy, which is based on Karya Karana Siddhanta, where both are different. And for example, like pot is different from the sand which is made of. And the other one, which is like Vivartavada or Abhedavada. And here it says it's an other way around. Like sand is appearing as pot. Both are not the same. And this is thinking they are different. And this is more of like Advaitic philosophy where everything is Maya. This book contains explaining about the debates of different ways in which Ramaraya Kavi stands for like Ramanuja Sri Bhashya, and at the same time explains like what is Mithya, what is Satya, and what is Nirguna, and what is Saguna, and also like whether Ishvara is Advatiya or Satvadiya, etc. And another difference between the two, and discussed in depth in this book, is also like how different philosophies understand Mimamsa. And Ramanuja's philosophy claims to have like a single Shastra understanding both, but Advaita differentiates. And there are different Vedas, like where they argue from like who is Adhikara and what is a Vishaya, and like what is a Phalabheda and what is a fruitfulness of this, etc. And thus this book is more about like how Brahman is understood between the two philosophies, and needs like a separate topic to discuss. This book is available in Telugu with the effort of Mella Cheruvu Venkata Subramanya Sastri Garu. And yeah, let's proceed on to the next work, which is Vedanta Mukthavali. Vedanta Mukthavali, Vedanta Upanishads, Mukthavali, which is like pearl necklace. And this is also another great legendary work written by Ramaraya Kavi, and it is composed of around 790 verses explaining detail about 12 Upanishads. Out of them are like 8 are from Purvattara and 4 are them Uttarartha Upanishads. And some of the Upanishads that he discusses in this is like Prashnopanishad, Mandokopanishad, and what is Paravidya and what is Aparavidya. And at the same time, like what is Atmagnana, and also briefly discusses about like Taitropanishad, which explains about one's duties and all. So this book itself contains like 730 verses, and Professor Balasubramaniam from IIT Bombay has made this great effort in bringing this Vedanta to all the audience, and which is one of the rare book that is available these days out of all like 40 or so books that is available. And some of the other books includes Bhagavata Chatusloke. Yeah, this is a very small book where Ramaraya Kavi takes the 4 slokas from Bhagavata Purana, and whenever like Brahma says like Sarvam Nene, Sarvam, everything is me, everything is in me, and he kind of explains like what are the differences between like different philosophical understanding of this. And as we discussed like Karya Karana Sambandha or like Abheda Bhava, and he goes in depth detail for each and every sloka. He explains with 20 or 30 verses like how you have to understand this Chatusloka. And the other works, some of them are like Hayagriva Sahasranamavali, where he wrote extensively on Lord Hayagriva with more than like 1,000 verses, and Advaita Vijaya, which is more on like Advaita, and Siddhanta Sindhu and Vedantamritam. Yeah, as mentioned in the beginning of this talk, only some of these books are available, and only handful of them are like being translated into Telugu and English. And also there are like so many challenges in identifying these books these days, in like finding like the printers and distribution, etc. And why one has to read Bellamkonda Ramaraya Kavi? In order to understand these questions like who is God, what is Brahman, and all, we are currently kind of like dominated by modernity and also by the rational world where we question everything. And also we have like different gurus and different schools of thought popping up, and only some of the works like philosophical works of like Bellamkonda Ramaraya Kavi enlightens us in this journey, where they are like authentic sources and looking back at our brahmanas from shastras, and also not just taking from one perspective, one philosophical thought perspective, but also gives like in-depth details and commentaries available. Now let's proceed on to the one of the books that he wrote for the normal people, or like normal sadhakas who didn't have like extensive background in Advaita, which is Dharma Mañjari. So far we have seen like some of the Advaitic works which he wrote, like Vedanta Mukthavali, Bhagavadgita-bhashyarkaprakasika, Shankara and all these Udgranthas which needs extensive background and understanding of Vedanta. Now the question comes to, did Ramaraya Kavi wrote anything for normal sadhakas or dharma interested folks? And following book belongs to that section, where this book contains 3 parts. One is Dharma Prasamsa, which says about the greatness of dharma, and second one is Dhana Varnanam, and how Artha is like explained from Ramaraya perspectives. And the third thing is like Kama Mimamsa, which discusses more of like vicharana, kama vicharana. And fortunate enough that Dharmapuri Seshagiri Rao Sarmagaru, who was like a Sanskrit Pandit from Narsaraupeta, from the same village as Ramaraya Kavi, translated this book into Telugu. And this book is published by Sadhana Grantha Mandali. We had to mention about this just because like availability of these books is these days is very rare. And most of these 3 parts of this book, like Dharma Prashamsha, Dhanavarnanam, and Kama Mimamsa, all goes in question and answer format. And this question and answer format is also the style of Ramaraya Kavi, where he poses a question and then gives the answer to that question, and he himself poses a question from the different school of thought, like why is it not like that, why is it understood this way, Gita mentions like this, or like Manusmriti mentions like this. Then he corrects like the way on, depending on the situation, how you have to understand this, and how these three, Dharma, Artha, and Kama, are the gateway to moksha for sadhakas. And he goes in depth level these detail on these three purusharthas. Now I start with like Kama Mimamsa and Dhanavarnanam, and then we get on to Dharma Prasamsa. Kama Mimamsa. What is Mimamsa? Mimamsa means Vicharana. So in this book, he discusses about like Kama, and Acharya drives us through various question answer style. And the first question that pops up whenever we think about like this is like, why Kama isn't Purushartha? That does mean like, do we need to worship Manmada, or is Manmada part of Purushartha? So Acharya says like, no, Manmada is not considered as Purushartha. One can argue that like if you start having like Manmada as a part of Purushartha, one can say that whoever deity they pray, like Bhagwan Hanuman or like Lord Ganesha, are a part of this Purushartha. So here it doesn't refers to any specific deity or any person. Acharya clarifies, saying that one considers something as a part of Purushartha if we pray for it, and at the same time one has to experience it. And whatever the experience that we get is a guide to moksha. That itself is considered as Purushartha. And the part of like there are several dictionaries like which says like Mamara Nigantuvu, which says like Kamaha Panchasara Sparsaha. It is from Mamara Nigantuvu, and it says that one which we experience with our panchendriyas is considered as Purushartha. No, Acharya says that not just like here, it means like only the part which refers to Manmada, but the understanding of Purushartha is not related to Manmada. And now the next question follows, why not whenever whatever we pray, like even this like craving for korika or icha, Manmada is not considered as Purushartha. You yourself just mentioned that whatever we pray, and then Acharya goes on explaining like what is exactly the difference between different types of kama. And also like one of the Shruti says, not just the dictionaries, but also one of the Shruti says like Manmada is like a Vishnu Rupa, then which means like Vishnu Bhaktas who prays to Vishnu or find union with him, like Sayu Jamyu, which is like the incarnation with the Vishnu. Like I am praying to Vishnu. Doesn't that qualify as Purushartha? And yeah, Acharya responds saying that Vishnu is in Shruti Vakya. It doesn't refers to Bhagavan Vishnu. It always refers to the ultimate Brahman. In order for a jiva, in order to unite with something, Sayujamyo, he says that he needs to give up on his like understanding. And this understanding is also in like two phases. It's like Stula and also like Sukshma. And that is only possible when one unites with Brahman and he understands from the Brahman perspective. So the only Aikyam is like Shivaikyam, which is like the ultimate thing. And then the question follows like, what exactly? Okay, you are referring to it as Purushartha. Why not? It's like Stri can't worship this, or doesn't just applies to Stris and all. And Acharya clarifies here the meaning of Purusha. Purusha is taken out from the Sanskrit word, and it is defined into and it's break down into two parts, which is like Puri and Saya. Puri is like inside the body, and living Saya, which is like Jiva. So here Purusha kind of refers to the Jiva. It doesn't mean like we are referring only to men or only to women. And he also says like rishis who guided us with these shastras have done this for the sake of easier pronunciation, or it changed over time, and we should respect like why they interpreted in that way. And the next question follows is like, okay, you gave it details on Purushartha, and doesn't the Gita says Kama Krodha Prabhavaditi? And also Manusmriti says, Najatu kamaha kamanamu pabogena. So in these two, kama kind of refers to the icha or korika, which is kind of like built up in our manasu. And Acharya says this is where you need to understand the kama. So there are like three types of way of understanding this. Tatra kamana icha. Tatra kamana icha refers to the first kama, which is like the icha which is built up in our manasu. And it is, Acharya says, it is like mano dharma. Like you can't say that, oh, I can't have ichas. And the second thing, kamyamana vishaya. And this one refers to the object that which you are craving for. Word which we say for this is also kama. And the third kama refers to kamanadi daivam manmadaha. So, and the third kama refers to the manmada, who is like the Vishnu Rupa and who is like adhikara of kama. And the Purushartha which we are discussing in this aspect refers to the Padartha, is the second one, or the Vishaya, or the object. And how this kama needs to be bounded by dharma is what I will explain it today, is what Acharya says. And it goes on like why the discussion also goes on like why there is an abhilasha, and Acharya tries to correct it, saying like this is a first part which is like mano dharma, manasu dharma. And now going on to the second part, like now you mentioned about like the kama refers to the vishaya or the padartha. What are the gunas of this padartha? And Acharya clarifies us, every padartha needs to be experienced by us, like by Purusha, by Jiva. And he is referring here to Sabda, Sparsa, Rupa, and Rasadi Padartha. The Padartha needs to have these four qualifications, and one has to experience it for that. And that is referred as kama. And this Padartha is divided into two types. One is like Sat Padartha and Asat Padartha. And Sat Padartha is the one that is like controlled or like bounded by dharma, and it obeys dharma. And the other one is like adharma sammatamu. So whenever we have to think about like an object or vishaya, we need to think about whether it is bounded by dharma or not, or whether my icha is kind of like reasonable in this sense of like understanding this object. And he also goes on like giving some examples in this line of kama which one has to deal with it and one has to crave for it. And some of the examples he gives are like yajna sistavanam, like one has to do like so many yajnas, and doing yajnas has to be like bounded by dharma. And the second thing is Bhagavata Rupa Darsanam. One has to read more Puranas, understand the Sastras, understand our Rishis. And another example he gives is also when given that kama is kind of like tied to Manmada, he also says like Gruhastasya Rutau Vara Gamanamu Dharma. So he also says one has to approach his wife only during the Rutu period, only in the certain period. And then the question goes on, isn't that kind of falls under dharma section? Why are you considering as kama section approaching wife or anything? And then Acharya gives explanation in two ways. This is the way that we change our drishti. So, and there are two drishtis which we look. One is like dharma drishti and one is kama drishti. And kama drishti is the one that in this aspect, it gives like aihika sukham, only in this loka. And given that you are following dharma shastras in order to do and all, it falls under paraloka dharma. So each thing is not only considered as kama, but these kind of understanding is always interlinked between dharma and kama. Okay, now, and he goes on saying it's not only just between dharma and kama, artha is also needed. Like otherwise kama is not possible. Like whenever you crave for something, or like whenever you want to do some yajna or something, you definitely need artha. So dharma, artha and kama are interrelated, and how I explained in this book is what Acharya says, and which we look into. And is the okay, now you are saying the kama is a thing that is craving and kind of like accepted. And the next thing is, does this kama increases over time or decreases over time? And here Acharya says like najhatu kamaha iti smruti stu dharma viruddha kama pareti na virodha. What this says is like, this is the Acharya refers to the Smriti Vakya, where the kama decreases over a period of time if it is bounded by dharma. And kama is also the gateway to moksha, which we will look into. And he says, like, whatever is bounded by dharma, that kama kind of like decreases over time. And if you follow the thing which is not bounded by dharma, and if you start craving, then it is not like it is considered as karma in a different way, like not the second one which is bounded by dharma sammata, but not like it falls under adharma sammata, and over a period of time you keep on craving for that. And one has to understand, like, what's the craving, what is this bringing, and why are you suffering for that, is like a different discussion. And that kama which is decreases over time is a guide to moksha. Kama is a hetu, like an instrument to moksha. Okay, this is also good. Now, what about the saying in Gita? Sasantim apnoti na kamaha kamihi. Isn't it Gita saying, until we get rid of all this craving, like all this kama, we won't get moksha? And Acharya says that it is not possible for the normal people to get rid of all this craving. Here, the Gita refers to jnanis, and at the same time, the same Vakya refers to the normal sadhakas in a different way. Like, it is not possible that one can kind of like eliminate all the ichas or something. One has to identify the padartha, and identifying padartha means identifying the dosha in that each vishaya. And how is this possible? Acharya says only through guru. Like, one has to approach to guru in order to understand this, and they kind of like can't make like own judgment based on like, oh, Gita says this, and because there is a faults in which how one will understand it. And the second thing, and goes on like similar, oh, you are referring to jnanis, it is available. Can normal gruhasthas also become moksha sadhakas? And then Acharya gives more examples, and one of the examples that he refers to is like Janaka, who understand his antaratma and got this atmanusandhanam, where thus how he ended up with moksha. It's not just only sannyasis will get moksha, but it's also duty of everyone in order to strive for that. He also refers to kama tyagastu jitendriya sthaiveti and kama tyagatmakamo prabodho strayan. So, given that you questioned about like these indriyas, he says that it is also bad for the manasu. So you developed this habit of like, I don't want this craving, I will live as sannyasa. That is possible, and it is good for your indriyas, but it is not good for ajitendriyas, which is like manasu, atma. It is kind of like bad. Even though you try to suppress it, those keeps on coming, and one must make an effort in understanding this. And what is the understanding this abhilasha, and what is this vishayabhilasha, why I am craving for it, and how it will result in it. And he, Acharya, gives like one more example, saying that once you try to get rid of this ichcha, or you try to suppress it, it comes in an other form. Like this vishayabhilasha which you are trying to suppress will come in the other form of like krodha, which is like more you develop more anger towards it, and it turns into like more lobha, because you suppressed it. But instead of that, you have to understand this, like which one is controlled by dharma and which one is not controlled by dharma. And he also, at the end of this book, he tries to give like, what are the things that will help us in order to understand this, and why one has to do this. And some of the examples he gave is like, one has to follow the ancestral traditions, and one must make an effort in understanding their puranas. One must make an effort in developing interest to like yajnas, and goes on in details, which he refers to the other books, like why one has to do yajna, and understanding and reading these shastras under guru, etc. Now let's proceed on to the second part of the book, Dhana Varnanam. It says like Dhana Varnanam, like Acharya says, I will explain about the qualities of Dhana, and how this is related to dharma is also we will see, and how this is related to kama. And before starting this subject of the book, Acharya gives a powerful example of what is the power of Artha. And in Bhagavata Purana, like Parikshit Maharaja tries to send off Kali. Hey, okay, like, and in order to send off Kali, he gave, like, lot of meat, lot of alcohol, and a lot of gambling and vaisyas to Kali, but still Kali is not satisfied with these four. And then Parikshit Maharaja gave like dhana, which is like suvarna, to him to stay away from. Then Kali is satisfied. This shows like the power of Artha and how everything is kind of like controlled by Artha. Even though we say like we have to earn money in the ways of dharma, but when Artha becomes like the leader, then everything is controlled by Artha. And there are like so many questions that keeps popping up in this discussion. And one of the example is Acharya says is like Artha is important. It's not like you can't say that, oh, I don't need money or anything. And the simple example that he gives is like, in order to Veda Hita Karma, in order to any yagnas or any yagas, you need money. And you can't say like, I don't have money, and how you can do it. So you have to work hard in order to earn money so that you can do dharma sammata karyas. And it is not possible for normal people to live with Artha, and any of the dharma is also associated with Artha. And another example goes on like, how you will do Upanayana, because doing Upanayana is like the dharma sammata karya, you need Artha for it. And entire Grihastha is kind of like based on the dhana. And the next question in the forms is like, oh, so far we thought like Artha is kind of like bad things, or referred to as like, oh, not having too much money is bad, or says is bad. Then Acharya says is like one should know the limit. And in order to identify the limit on the karyas that one does, and he says like, what are the dushkarma versus satkarma? And he tries to differentiate between the two. And one has to understand between the differences between these things. And this dushkarma and satkarma are not associated with dhana. There is no like guna for Artha. It's all depends on gunas of the yajamanya, like who owns the Artha and what karyas they needs to do. And everyone is kind of like can't understand this on their own. So everyone needs to take the help of gurus in the times of need. And how this dana is like differentiates like what karyas you have to do, which is like not just karmas but also like safala karya versus nishfala karya. And Acharya goes on explaining like there are two types of karyas. One is like safala karya and nishfala karya. And now what he refers to as safala karya, in safala karyas, like one has the money, so he has to do like dana is a charity, which is like the highest thing considered once you have like once you earn like dana. And the second one, even in this dana, Acharya says that vidya dana is like the most prominent and important, and doing yogas, donating to yogas. And the second one is like depending on the kala paristhiti, one has to like give like money or donate money to their country or like to their desha, so that like in order to sustain, it's not just like one has to hold the money, but at the same time one has to think about how he can give more. The more you give, the more you get. That is the quality of dana, Acharya says. And the second thing, even in the safala karya, there is also another part, like not just dana but also like anubhava or like experience. One has to make sure like they are doing the experience of this Artha based on their anubhava. And what are these anubhavas, and what are the things that we are guided as, which is like some of the examples he gives is like a grihastha, like one has to raise a family, one has to raise a kids, and then in order to do all the daily responsibilities and take care of the kids and parents and all, one needs money and one has to work hard. It's not just a responsibility, but it's also a dharma in order to do it. And you can't get moksha like leaving everything and like, oh, I will be the like sannyasi, I don't want kids and all, is which are the ideas which are prevalent these days. That doesn't refers to. Acharya says these are the things one has to do. And if you point to some sannyasis and say those are like the exceptional people, like we are not discussing about them, this is majorly coming from the normal people, and how one has to understand these differences, and the difference between material stuff and what, and the differences and like what you spend on this money. and how he says, like, and we already spoke about like kama or icha, like the different things which we have to crave for, and how these are like interlinked here. And between like, and always Acharya says like, keep in mind it's not about like only one thing. Like Artha is there, Artha has to be divided. We have to think about like Satkarma or Dushkarma, and Sapalakarya versus Nishvalakarya. And he also says like, Tasmad Yada Dushkarmani Dhanastrayani Tada Satkarmanyapi Dhanastrayaneva. So everyone has to remember this. Like Tasmat Yada Dushkarmani Dhanastrayani. It's not like only you can do bad things with Artha, which you only like, satisfy yourself. Also you can do like good things, and good things is what one we have to look for. And before we jump into like the third part of the book, which is like Dharma Prasamsa, Acharya summarizes all the three, like Dharma, Artha, Kama, the Trivarga, in these beautiful verses, in this like powerful Sukhapi Vyanjaka Vritti Janakatvat Kamasya Mokshopayatvam. And this is the first verse which he says like, the one, given that one needs to have like a stable mindset in order to achieve moksha, it is only attainable one conquers those desires. And how you will conquer? Only once you experience it. Hence kama is like the direction to the moksha, or like the instrument to moksha. And the later part of the book, like which we see in the Kama Mimamsa, explains about this. And the second part is like Artha Dhinatvad Vishayana Ardhasya Kamopayatvam. So this is the second part where he is trying to link like the difference between Artha and Kama. As we are already mentioned that Kavindra is referring to the common man, and one has to take responsibilities without experiencing them. And this reminds me of one of the other things where devotees comes to Kanchi Paramacharya, Chandrasekhara Mahaswamigal, and they say that, oh, we were unable to take care of the family and I want to become sannyasa. And Swami says that the summary of his entire teachings is go and handle the family responsibility. And this is one of the powerful statement which he makes. And in these chapters of Dhanavarnanam, we also see how this Artha and Kama are related. And given that Vishaya or Padartha is bound by Artha, and the third statement he makes, Dharma Dinatvada Ardhasya Dharma Syardho Payatvam. He says like Ardhamu Dharma Margam. Ardhamu Dharma Margamuna Arjimpadaginadi, which means like you have to end this Ardha controlled by or like guided by dharma, and hence like dharma is a ardha sadhana. So it's not like you can get money and then through whatever means of way we can do, but it's most of like dharmamu ardha sadhanamu. And in the previous verses he shows like how Artha and Kama are related, and now he's saying like, is a ardha sadhana. So he kind of like reminds us throughout this book of Dharma Prashamsha, which we look, and how Dharma one has to, sadhaka has to do is like sadhana. You have to practice more in like, understanding like how to earn money, which is like guided by Dharma. And now on to the third part of the book, the Dharma Prasamsa. Out of all the three Purusharthas, like Dharma is considered as Sreshta. And Sreshta means which is like Uttama Mainadi, which is out of all the three, like Dharma is a Uttama. And why is this Dharma considered as Uttama? And Acharya refers to the Jaimini Sutra. In Jaimini Sutra, he says like Chodana Lakshano Dharto Dharmaha. He tries to separate these and explain this. Chodana Lakshano, the one which is guided by Vedas. So why Dharma is Sreshta? So which is bounded by Vedas, and Vedas has to be the pramana whenever we say or refer to dharma. And here the Artha, the second part says it's like the Shreyas, the one that is benefit, one gives like the benefits, one guides us, one which is very important, is considered as dharma. And Acharya goes in explaining like each three parts, like how, why Vedas are pramana, and why this is kind of like benefit or beneficial to us, and at the same time like what he considered as dharma, and he gives more examples on like different types of dharmas one has to follow. So, and there are also one question that Acharya says, like, oh, isn't this everything has to be present in Veda in order to consider it as Dharma? And Acharya says, no, there is no need that everything has to be present in Veda. But given that it was guided by rishis and over a period of time it changes, one has to consider the other things are also as Veda Pramana. For example, no one has shown us like, no, we have to write on top of the paper. Whenever we start writing, we'll write Om. We apply like on the paper. These are the traditions that keeps coming from ages, and there is no need to question with the rational mind, like, why these are there in Vedas, show me the reference to Vedas, why I have to do this. Given that these are followed by our ancestors, there must have been some good reason behind it, and that is the shreyas the everything is referring to. So it's more of a ritual mind, which is more important than the rational mind in following this. And okay, so now we are saying like Veda as a pramana. Like what exactly? Can you please more elaborate on this? Okay, then Acharya says, why Veda as pramana? Prachakshenanumanena yastu bhayo na bujjate, and enam vidanti vedena tasmad vevasya vedaha. So here, like Prachakshanumanena, the one which you can't see, or which you can't see with your senses and which you can't experience with the senses, it is impossible. Prachakshanumana chetakani, which is not possible through his senses or through panchendriyas, and at the second time not can be, I mean, you can't reach it with just based on your normal thinking. So Vedas are there to explain something which you can't experience with your senses, and even like you think more about it, you can't find just based on your own knowledge. You need some guide, and Vedas are our guide. And it is the stance where like with Vedas are also defined from with, which means like they are the ones who says like, oh, this is how we should do. And that's why it's like we should take Vedas as pramanas, and everything that is derived from Vedas like puranas and so on, and we should always refer to the gurus. Okay, then now what is the quality of the second part, like the shreyas, and what is this? How is it kind of like related to Dharma or the Vedas? Can you please? And it goes on like the shreyas is also defined. Acharya says there are like two types of shreyas. One is like nitya shreyas, and the other one is like anitya shreyas. Nitya Shreyas, we know which is Nitya, which is present all the time. And in order to get that, there is only one thing, which is like moksha, like complete Nitya. And the second thing is Anitya Shreyas. Anitya Shreyas is also depends on like two things. One is like Aihika Loka. Aihika Loka refers to like family, like how you attain the money, Artha, and how you take care of the food, etc. And this Shreyas is kind of like divided into two types. And how Anitya Shreyas has to always guide the Shreyas, guide the Nitya Shreyas. And how you attain this moksha, he says it's only possible only through Dharma. And Dharma is there in order to transfer all your Aihika Sukhas into like Nitya Shreyas, like moksha. And okay, now you explained about the two things, one Veda as Pramana and Shreyas. And now let's think about Dharma. Isn't it Dharma just based on like Punya and Papa that I do, or whatever the activity I need to evaluate, like how much Punya or Papa associated with it? And Acharya says, yes, one will evaluate the Punya and Papa, but once you start looking more into your Atma, once you get like Antakarana Suddhi, like Atma Gnana, then you will start thinking or doing things like more from the point of not just for Punya and Papa, but the way you evaluate will differ, because you now know, like, it's more of like Atma Gnana. Like you can't evaluate every time, like, what is Punya and what is Papa, and it is like the next step and how you achieve it. And Acharya gives some examples on why some of the things you have to do is not just related to Punya and Papa, but more of like Antakarana Suddhi, and how every situation is associated with Dharma on both the sides. Not just like you are doing one habit and Dharma is associated with like the thing what you will do, and how others are also receiving it. Okay, now the question was like, can you give me some examples of these Dharma? And Acharya lists some of the dharmas which everyone has to follow. Like Devata Dharma, Manushya Dharma, and there is also like Devata Dharma. What are some of the Manushya Dharmas? Agnav Prapta Hutihi. One has to do more yagnas, and why they have to understand like why doing yagnas is like dharma karya associated with dharma. We all know like doing yagnas, like why they are beneficial, and how Bhagavan Surya helps us in like giving back our rains and the cycle of life, which itself is like another topic. But he says like doing yagnas takes the precedence. And the second time is Devata Dharma. It's not only associated with the Manushya. Once you do yagnas, there's also Dharma to the Devatas, where Devatas will bless bless the Manushya with enough children, enough Artha and all, and like giving like good habits, etc. So it's always when we do yagna, we shouldn't think from one point, but also from the Devatas perspective. It's also their dharma in order to do that. And the second thing he refers to as there is also Raja Dharma and Praja Dharma. So Raja Dharma refers to it is a duty of Raja to take care of the people. Tada Rajna Praja Papa. So like the Raja has to take care of their Praja. And what is the duty of Praja here? The Praja has to pay taxes back to Raja. So it is also like not from one side, but from the second side. Another one he says like Putrasya Vidya Pradhanam Dharma. So when one leads the Gruhastha and becomes a father, like giving education to his son is also considered as dharma. And it is not just like we say that we send to the school and all, and it is also the responsibility of the father in order to take care of their kids. And what is the dharma of the son? Putrasya cha pitus samrakshana dharma. So the duty of the sons is to take care of the father. It's not like I got a job, I will leave and I will live life on my own. It's also like he also refers to it. Also there is another duty of the son in this dharma relation. And what are the duties associated in the society? What are the dharmas? Is every duty is kind of considered as dharma? And Acharya says yes, everything is bounded by dharma. And how we came up with varnashrama, and some of the examples that he gives is like tada yajamanyasya purohitama dhanadi dhanam dharma. So once the yajamanya ends like certain dhana, it is his duty to perform the karyas where he kind of like gives enough dana to like the purohit. So there is also a relation between like yajamanya and purohit. It's not like yajamanya will do duty and give money to the purohit. And what is the other side? Like what is the dharma of the purohit? His duty is to give hitopadesha, like guide the yajamanya in this aspect. Like it is also his dharma, not just like taking money and living, but also like give like hitopadesha on how you have to live life, when do you have to do yagnas and all those things. And this entire cycle is kind of considered, and Acharya goes with all these examples like how this is kind of related to varnashrama dharma and how multiple varnas are related. And another example which he gives in this aspect is evam swarnakara kulanadina kundala ghataniti karanam dharma. And he kind of refers to the one who make pots and like blacksmiths who work on like the different metals. It is their duty to do that, and also like produce like whatever the jewelry or whatever the kunda like pots and all. And it is their dharma to do that. And what is the dharma on the other side of varnas who are doing? It is their dharma to buy them and to make the livelihood possible. So, and that's how all these varnas are interrelated. And of course, varnashrama dharma is a separate topic to discuss on its own. And another example which Acharya gives is kind of related to farmer on the land. And tada krushi valasya karshanadi dharma. So it is a duty of the farmer in order to raise the crops and make sure that fertile the land, and it is his dharma. And what is the other side of dharma? There is no person or something associated with it. And he says there is a duty for the Bhudevi, also for the land. Bhavasya sasya prasavo dharma. And it is the duty of the dharma of the land where in order to help the farmer by having the crops and all. So it's not just like human to human related, but it's also human to devata related, human to every object in the earth is kind of like related here. Now, okay, thank you for explaining this dharma. The next question that comes up is like, is killing someone considered as dharma? Oh, I heard in like Puranas, like there are so many fighting, like Ramayana, Kurukshetra, Mahabharata and all. Like, how is this killing considered as dharma? And Acharya says like it is a Kshatriya dharma, and Satruvada is associated in the part of Kshatriyas. then the contradictory question comes is like, oh, is it always related to kshatriya, or one has to approach the kshatriya in order to do Shatru Samhara? Then Acharya says like, no, it's not just related to kshatriya dharma, but it also there are like 6 types of papa karya. If one is doing those papa karya, it is like everyone's duty in order to protect the society and or like himself. And some of the papa karyas he says is like fire to home, or like mixing poison in food, and one with a weapon, or like thief, like hurting other cells, and there are like land stealers, or like whatever that comes in the society. In these aspect, whenever you observe like papa karya, Shatru Samhara is a dharma for anyone, everyone. And goes on, the next part of the discussion goes in like, the Acharya also says even in some small sections of adharma there is also dharma. For example, the question comes up like, let's say one thief like steals money from someone in order to feed his family. Like, how do you consider this as dharma? Isn't it adharma? Acharya also says like, there is also small portion of dharma associated in it, where when thief is trying to steal money from someone in order to feed his family, he's taking care of his family, he's doing his dharma from his side. So, and how you evaluate the punya and papa on these two things is kind of like, guided by shastras, and one can't actually says like, the situation becomes more complex, and they have to approach the gurus who read this dharma shastra. And finally, in order to do this, like judge anything based on the situation, everyone has to look back on dharma shastras. Like, the next question comes up, can you elaborate more on this dharma? And Acharya says, okay, go and listen here. Like, dharma is not just based on a single entity. It is divided into two types. One is swadharma, and the other one is swadharma, which is more like, related to the individual, and what are things I have to do, what are things one has to do in order to attain moksha. And there is a paradharma, like sometimes you go and do like bad things or like good things. There is also dharma associated to the other person, and the one which guides us to moksha is more based on swadharma. One has to understand it and do those karyas from his point of things, and it is not always like you do something and forget about and the next question follows is like, Gita says, swadharme nidanam sreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. And Acharya refers to the Gita here, says like, the swadharma is the one that refers to the moksha, and paradharma is not always associated with moksha, but also more of like naraka, and also like nicha janma once after. And the question comes like, oh, why can't we say like that? Isn't the paradharma associated with dharma? So he says that dharma is not associated for you. Whenever you do some good thing or bad thing to others, from their perspective, it is dharma, but it is not something that you can judge your actions based on. Oh, someone got beneficial, then I did dharma. That's not how you have to say. Whatever the actions that you do is controlled by the dharma understanding of yours, and in order to understand this, it also like depends on different time period on which you are understanding and different situation, and you have to approach to dharma shastras. And the other example Acharya gives in this aspect is like, everything is not associated based on one reading, and one has to take like situation into the action, and also like different time period, like kala anusarana, whether this is dharma in this time or not. And one example Acharya tries to give is like, there were in previous yugas, it was there like, when the widow is like trying to seek children, he can like samsara with the husband's brother, the widow can do, but that is not the yuga dharma. Like, this might be good in like the other yugas, but now you shouldn't point such things and say this is good for this yuga. That is not like yuga dharma. So you have to always keep in mind like in what time that dharma is referring to, and hence we have like dharma shastras and gurus associated with it. And getting back to the money, like when the Acharya says about like dhana varnanam, and he also says in dharma prasamsa, he says like what sort of money one has to earn, like Artha. And there are like 3 types of Arthas, like one is uttama, madhyama, and adhama. and what is uttama and swarjitam, the one you earn based on the dharma is considered as, and the one you take from your father is considered as like madhyama dharma, and whatever from the others like brothers or wife or etc. is considered as adhama dharma. So you have to always work hard to get the money, and which is always bounded by dharma. And what is the purpose of dana? And we already have discussed like about like vidya dana and how one has to do it. Is also not just like the charity associated with artha, but it also has a dharma. It's like everyone's duty. Once you earn certain money, like he has to do something for the society, something for the country. And at the same time, in doing this charity work or anything, one has to keep in mind are all these purusharthas, and how these all three are related to like ultimate reality. One has to understand it like the brahma bhavana, and the bhavana that one says like a sarvam brahmam, like one has to work hard and strive hard towards that. And recollecting the summary of Trivarga Purushartha and Dharma once more: Dharma Dinatvada Ardhasya Dharmasyardo Payatvam. So in Dharma is also like the Ardha Sadhanam, and how like Ardha and Kama are kind of like connected, we already discussed. And with this, we can conclude or wrap up the session on Dharma Mañjari. And there are the other books like Vedanta Mukthavali, Shankara Bhashyam, needs like a separate discussion on their own. And this shows like the extensive, like how eminent philosopher like Bellamkonda Ramaraya Kavindra is. And one thing everyone has to remember is like Bharatiya Darshana can only be understood in reading such works, and in reading, and there are many scholars who made like enough effort in bringing those works to normal people. For example, like the Dharma Mañjari, which we have seen, and questions still exist in the recent times. And it's not like with one book you will understand everything like before, but we are looking at like which books to read, and these books guides us, like whether they guides us into sanmarga or durmarga differs on us, like how the perspective which we look. And yes, these are the questions that troubles many in understanding the Brahman, and also the questions which we are born into the civilization where we are gifted with so many thinkers and philosophers. So hope we will make an effort in understanding these gurus, and we will look at the other works of Ramaraya in the next sessions, and how he sacrificed for Advaita, and with all his life he lived only for like less than 40 years and composed like such a big works. So yeah, with the blessings of Lord Hayagriva and Acharya, concluding today's sessions. And please do subscribe to Atharva Forum, and Dhanyavad. Shri Rama Swasti.